If you're working in tech, there's no chance you have not heard about OpenClaw yet. This is by far one of the most hyped AI topics these days, and that for a good reason. OpenClaw is what everybody hoped AI would be in the first place, a personal assistant that does not feel like just another program, but more like a real human collaborator that you can talk to, responding in a natural and unique way, remembering conversations from weeks ago, interacting with tools and systems just like you would, and even handle tasks autonomously while you're sleeping or busy elsewhere. So no more wasting your day with boring stuff. Let's just outsource all our boring work to AI. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. So yeah, OpenClaw is something special. And the funny thing is that it's not created by a billion-dollar company. OpenClaw is an open source project powered by a super active community, which means you can run it on your own hardware, your PC, your home server, a VPS in the cloud, and just connect it to any LLM you want. You can even use local LLMs with Olama or LM Studio, whatever. You have the total freedom, there's no vendor lock-in. But, and this is the key, as amazing OpenClaw is, it's still a beta hobby project, so you gotta trust it with real access, like files, tools, commands, and a single bad prompt can do some real damage. So never expose it directly to the internet and be very careful what access and what tasks you give it. Nevertheless, I thought it's just worth trying out because everybody's talking about OpenClaw these days, and let's find out if it lives up to the hype and if it's truly the AI game changer everybody's hoping. Spoiler, it kinda is, but it has its caveats. More about that soon. First things first, I'll show you how to get it up and running super simply and securely, of course. And so I'll skip just executing the one-liner command on my local Mac because honestly, it's too risky as a daily driver to run on my production workstations. If you're a brave guy, you can certainly try it, of course. But in this video, we'll deploy it on a VPS from my favorite provider, Hostinger, with their new OpenClaw template. I think that's super cool. They just released a one-click solution that's running on Ubuntu Linux, isolated in Docker, and using traffic for a secure HTTPS web UI. You can even enable firewall settings from the dashboard. And of course, you have backups, you have logs, and yeah, it's just keeping everything sandboxed from your home lab, where you can easily wipe and rebuild stuff if you're using this for testing. And by the end of the video, you'll have your own OpenClaw setup with some powerful skills enabled, security tips to avoid the disaster. So let's dive right in. And of course, thanks Hostinger a lot for sponsoring this video. Alright guys, so now let's get started. Let's set up OpenClaw on my favorite provider Hostinger with one of their KVM2 plans. So that includes 2 CPU cores, 8 gigs of memory, 100 GB NVMe storage. So that's more than enough for an OpenClaw instance. So when you click on deploy, that will guide you through the setup process where you can choose if you want to commit for 1, 12 or 24 months on the Hostinger's plan. Of course, the longer you commit, the higher the cost savings. Yeah. By the way, don't forget to use my code LEMPA. You will find that, of course, in the description box down below. So there you get an additional 10% off all of the KVM2 plans on Hostinger. So don't miss that. And by the way, if you want to use their Nexus AI credits, so that's pre-configured and automatically integrated in their OpenClaw template, you also get 2 times the credits when it's the first VPS you're deploying. So invest 5 AI credits and you get 5 for free on top. You also can enable instant web scraping, a direct AI email if you're committing for longer than 12 months. You can also choose if you want daily auto backup. I certainly would recommend it because if you're experimenting a lot and you're doing some mistakes, it's always good to roll back to a previous day. And then you just choose a server location that's nearby where you have a low latency and go through the setup process. It's super simple. You also can add other LLM providers, of course, if you don't want to use Nexus AI credits for sure. By the way, we will later on in this video talk about AI providers, LLM options you have, because one recommendation or one warning that I want to give you right at the beginning, if you're using a pay-as-you-go provider, so that means you're using an API key or you buy credits and only pay for what you use, these AI credits can burn out super fast because OpenClaw is very token hungry. But again, we will talk about that later. You can see I've just deployed my KVM2 plan on Hostinger here, and that already got deployed with a traffic reverse proxy instance. It already got trusted HTTPS certificates. One thing that I would recommend, there's a port forwarding here, which you probably should not use to connect, because as you can see, that's a direct port exposure. It is not secured by HTTPS. But if you return to the overview where you can get all of the details of your hostinger's instance, there's a button called OpenClaw. And this is using the traffic instance with trusted TLS certificates, an encrypted HTTPS connection, and your hostinger's dynamic domain. And there you can securely log into the OpenClaw's dashboard. Copy the gateway token, so this is used for the authentication. Paste that in here, log in, and your instance is ready to go. That's the web interface of OpenClaw. On the left side, you have the overviews. There you can see the gateway status. If you see the gateway is connected, then everything is up and running, because that's the OpenClaw's dashboard is actually just connecting to the internals OpenClaw service. If anything goes wrong, you might just wipe your instance and redeploy it again. Then it should all work. And here you can also see all the channels you have added if you connected OpenClaw to WhatsApp, Telegram. Of course, I will talk about that later, what that all means, and about the sessions, about cron jobs, about agents, skills. So there are so many cool things that we can explore here and talk about. And I'm honestly still learning how to actually use this in a good way. But I've gone through some trial and error processes that I just want to share with you here. So one thing that is super important to know is not just how to connect to the web interface, because there are certain configuration settings here that are not really so intuitive to configure from the web UI, which sounds weird. But in OpenClaw, some things can be much easier configured through the CLI tools. By the way, now would be a good time to add secure SSH keys and set up a firewall. You can do that in the security settings, go to firewall, and then you can configure any port forwardings, maybe add your own public IP address so that only you from your location get access to the web interface of OpenClaw or whatever. And what you should also do is go to the settings menu, go to SSH keys, and then add your public SSH key. So here's also a small guide how to generate a private and public SSH key pair. But I suppose you all have done that before at least once. So this is my public SSH key that's now added. And now we should be able to open a new SSH connection. Just copy this address and then paste it in my terminal. All right, so let's authenticate, and here we are logged in. So of course, as OpenClaw is still running in Docker, you cannot just execute the CLI command on the local server. It's still running in a Docker container. So with the docker ps command, we can see the name of the container, which you actually should see if I remove my camera. So here we will copy that and run a docker execute interactive terminal with that name here, and just run bash. So that now opens a shell inside the container. And now we can use the OpenClaw command. We'll just run this with help parameters. So this gives you a huge list of all the configuration or communication commands with your OpenClaw instance. So this is how you can also add additional providers or configure certain settings, add new skills. So one thing that you should always do once you fresh installed the OpenClaw instance is an OpenClaw onboard. Technically, we would not actually need this using the hostinger's deployment template because it's all pre-configured, but you can still run this afterward if you want to configure certain settings later. So here you also need to accept the security warning. Please read this. Yeah, OpenClaw is still a hobby project. Use it at your own risk. And yeah, that for a good reason. It's a powerful tool. And with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, probably heard that term before. So let's accept this. Yeah, we know what we're doing. And let's just continue using the quick start guide. So now, because we deployed OpenClaw on Hostinger, there is an existing configuration detected. We could just reset this configuration, but I don't want this. Of course, I want to use existing values, such as the Nexus GPT 5.2. That comes from the Nexus AI credits that I have uploaded to my Hostinger's provider. So let's just continue using these existing values, but now we can add more providers. So that really depends on the plan that you have. If you're using a pay-as-you-go or a flat fee account, it is super cool in OpenClaw that you can use these flat fees accounts, because that is not always possible in all programs. But for this testing instance, I will just continue using my Nexus AI credits. So I'm going to say skip for now. But of course, you can choose from any of these providers. that you like. All right, so now you can add models filtered by provider. So depending on what you have enabled, I will just use all providers and keep the current configured Nexus GPT 5.2. So that should be fine. And now we could add a channel. So this is a way how to communicate with your OpenClaw agents. And this is super cool, because then you can chat with your AI assistant from anywhere you are. Yeah, without using a VPN if you want. You could use Telegram, install the Telegram app on your phone. You could use WhatsApp. Yeah, then you can scan the QR code. It's similar to how to set up WhatsApp on your desktop. Yeah, there's a QR code that you scan with your phone, authenticate, and then you're logged into the browser. It's a similar process. I've tested Telegram, WhatsApp, and Discord, of course. My preferred choice is Discord, because that's the main source of communication. If you're on my Discord channel, by the way, you probably know I'm using this a lot, also in my tech community, and that's really nice. By the way, I've tried to set up iMessage on macOS, but that was a pain in the ass. That somehow didn't really work. So I think these three here on the top are the easiest ones to set up. I'm skipping this for now because I don't really need this, but it's super easy. You just select your channel, then just continue following the instructions, and then you're ready to go. All right, so here you can also add a search provider. Again, this also requires tokens and access, like Brave Search requires an API token, Gemini, Google Search, Grok, Perplexity. I'm gonna skip that for now, because OpenClaw can run any commands that are enabled in the Docker container or the VPS instance. So you can basically just run a curl command and then do a simple web search. But if you need AI web searching, then you need these search providers here. And we can also enable configure skills. This is recommended, but I will do this later, because I first want to finish the onboarding process together with you, and then we will talk about all these different things you can do later on in a lot more detail. Also gonna skip hooks. Actually, I don't really know what that is. I haven't tried that out. What is recommended is the TUI. So there's a terminal application that you could use instead of the chat app. So when we return to the web UI, you can see that this web UI is actually connected to the same session as the TUI. So anything that you type in here will also appear in the web UI and vice versa. And this is really super cool. By the way, I will add all of the important commands and instructions how to set up this on my website, christianlemper.de. So make sure to click the link in the description box down below, so then you don't need to remember all of these commands or write them down while watching the video. There you will find the complete write-up of this video tutorial. All right, so before we now start talking about the agents, about sessions, skills, and whatnot, I want to give you some general recommendations on LLM providers that you should pick, because I think this is the first thing that I have learned from using OpenClaw for a couple of weeks here, that depending on what LLM providers you choose, that makes a huge difference, because OpenClaw is only as intelligent as the model or the AI provider model that you're using. So in my opinion, there are three main categories of how to actually use LLM providers. There are local LLMs that most of you home lab guys will probably prefer. If you're running Olama, LLM Studio, or any of these other programs, you basically completely have the whole freedom. It's 100% private, so everything is processed and stored on your local device. So you have no cost except for the power consumption of the devices that you need to turn on. However, I can tell you from my own experience, that is not really the best way to use OpenClaw, because you will be very disappointed with the results from any of the local LLMs. And guys, trust me, I've tried out a bunch of different LLMs. And I've got a Mac Studio that actually can run powerful LLMs with a larger context window than most other computers can run. However, I still got very poor results from most of these tasks. And the reason for this is that OpenClaw does a lot of function calling, looping and iterating many times over different tasks. And the honest truth is that local LLMs are just so limited when it comes to that. There's a reason that there are billion-dollar companies buying all the memory in the world to expand their data centers. They have so much more power to run LLMs with a larger context window, and that cannot run on a local device in the same way as on a big server farm. So that's just the honest truth. And then you have basically two different options here. Yeah, you have the flat rate plans. So that means you have Anthropic Claude Pro or Max plan, OpenAI's ChatGPT Plus or a higher plan, where you pay like 10, 20, that can even go up to $200 per month. But that is well invested money. These plans are really good and the results are so much better compared to the local LLM results, especially on OpenClaw with a lot of function tool callings and so on. And I think this is really the best way to run this because it has a predictable fixed monthly cost. As long as you stay within that usage limit, you know what you're paying for. That is completely different with the pay per token, where you just upload your API key and then you pay for, whatever you use. But again, with a lot of function tool calling, a lot of looping, that can burn your credits super, super fast. So in my opinion, using platforms like OpenRouter or using raw API keys from Anthropic, OpenAI, or any other provider, even the Nexus AI credits that are Europe hosted, GDPR compliant, they burn out so fast. The flat rate plans are probably the best choice for running this. That's about LLM providers, but I think this is actually the heart and core of an AI assistant like OpenClaw, because if you're using the wrong LLMs, if you're using cheap LLMs, you will get poor results. And that doesn't make this program any useful, and you might be completely disappointed and throw OpenClaw in the trash can because you think it's completely bad, but that really just depends on the LLM and how good the LLM is that you're actually using. In my opinion, I've had the best results with Anthropic's Claude, but that's just for myself. You might have a different preferred choice. All right, so now let's return to the chat window. The chat window connects you to an OpenClaw agent. It executes tools and skills and generates responses based on its own isolated or sandbox configuration. So you can add multiple agents that all behave completely different and have different access to different kind of tools. And the very first time you open an agent, you have to configure its soul. That's how OpenClaw defines it. A soul, that's the dedicated configuration file. It's actually just a super dumb and simple markdown file where it's described and written. For example, who is the bot? So what's the name, the vibe, the emoji, and who you are. That's both written to these markdown files, the identity and the user. So containing information both about the agent and about you as a user. So first of all, you need to tell it who you are. So I'm just going to say, hello, I'm Christian. Let's see how it responds. So here you can see it automatically has written that to the identity markdown file and is responding to, hey, Christian, got it, I'm Claw, save that. So two choices. Do you want to keep that emoji that it gave it? And do you want a competent, direct, warm vibe or something different? And how do you want to communicate with that agent? So I'm just going to say I'm a YouTube content creator and home lab tech nerd creating videos and tutorials. So I'm just starting to give it some context so that the AI agent knows a little about me. Hey, I'm from Germany, but my content is primarily in English. And as you start having these conversations, it starts writing this to its memory files. So here you can see there is a long-term and a short-term memory. There are actually two types of memory files. There is a memory.md file, which is the main memory file, and then it can add a memory for different discussions. So when you go back, like, do you remember what we were talking like 2 or 3 weeks ago? It will search in this memory directory for any of the markdown files. I just want to show you how that actually looks like in the file system, because here you can also see that it's located in /data. That's actually the file system inside the Docker container. .OpenClaw workspace. So every agent can be attached to a workspace, which you probably can already guess can be completely different for any agents. What discussions you have with one agent, the other agent might not necessarily know. If you go to the agents menu, here you can go to files. And here you can inspect all of these files. So here is the main workspace file. These are all of the instructions, how to actually use this program, how to use the memory and how to actually behave. When you go to identity, this is the information that I gave it, helpful and friendly. And user, here's more information about myself. So everything that I told it, it has automatically written to these markdown files. So you can see that it's somehow written or created in a way that it starts behaving like a human, but it's actually super, super dumb and easy because it's just basically running an LLM that's reading markdown files. There's no black box or anything like this. It's super, super easy, but it's still a super effective system. What is also super interesting is that the agent conversations reset every time somewhere at 4 a.m. or so. So that's like adding a new session to an AI. And when it needs to remember something, it's then always searching in the memory. so that you always have a new fresh conversation each day, but it can still access some of the conversations that you had with the agent days or weeks ago. So super interesting. Trust me guys, it is much more powerful when you start adding skills. So what are skills? Well, skills basically give OpenClaw or the LLMs or the agents access to external tools. Here in the built-in skills, you can find things like 1Password. So you can search 1Password for any credentials and use that. You can see Apple Notes here, Apple Reminders. It has OpenAI image generation, Whisper for speech to text. It also has transcription engines. So when you say, hey, please transcribe the YouTube video XYZ, when you give it access to these skills, it can start using these tools. If you want to add these skills here, you can configure them in the CLI, of course. So let's go to OpenClaw configure, and then let's go to skills. So here, configure skills now, say yes. Okay, so install missing skills. This is everything from the built-in skills. Here you could set GitHub. So then you need to add your API token and stuff. So what's really cool in hosting when you need to add some credentials via environment variables or stuff like that, you can use the Docker manager and go to projects. So here you can actually manage the entire Docker Compose YAML file. So here for GitHub, for example, we need GH token. Put in the value here, save and deploy. So this, of course, will restart your OpenClaw instance. So let's wait a few seconds until the project has been redeployed. Also, sometimes these skills need dependencies or programs being installed in the actual container. For example, in the case of GitHub, we need to install the GH CLI tool first. And the cool thing about the hostinger's OpenClaw template is that it has installed Linux brew. So when you just run a brew install GH for GitHub, you can actually install the CLI version of GitHub just like you would on your local Mac, and then the OpenClaw agent can use it. And these are just the built-in skills. There's also a website called clawhub.ai. This is like a huge marketplace for the entire community to write and publish skills. For example, when you go to the Obsidian skill here, that's written by Peter Steinberger. And if you go here to files, that's a skill.markdown file. So here it's described what it all does. So that tells the LLM, hey, if you want to interact with that tool, you have to just use this program on the computer to communicate with it. And this honestly is so amazing, but it's also super dangerous, because since this came up, there have been community skills that were just there for collecting data or collecting credentials or anything. So you need to be a little cautious about what you're actually giving it access to and what type of skills you're installing on your system. If you want to install anything from ClawHub, you can just use the ClawHub command, like search Obsidian. So then you find all of the skills from the website. And you can, of course, use the install command or uninstall command to add or remove any of these community skills to your OpenClaw instance. But yeah, that's how you actually install these skills and make OpenClaw your own AI assistant. I think I don't need to tell you everything about this, because it is so personal and everybody might have their own different kind of use case, and it completely depends on what you actually want to do with it. But if you have some ideas for use cases, let me know in the comments so we can start working on this together. I can set up an OpenClaw instance and maybe do something cool with it. We will see, and make more videos about actual use cases and projects. I think that would be so interesting and so helpful. Nevertheless, I thought it might be useful to at least show you some kind of sneak peek what I'm currently working on. Because with this boilerplates project, that's just too much work for me. Yeah, there are regularly coming up pull requests from my Renovate bot that say, hey, you need to update this to that version and stuff like that. So I thought, why not use OpenClaw to somehow automate this, or at least give me some guidance and some notification about, hey, there is a new PR with that version, and might that be something breaking? And let OpenClaw not just completely automate this, but at least do some pre-qualification, yeah, some testing, some adding some context, and actually telling me, hey, what this is about, and give me more helpful insight so that I can work on this much more efficient, because honestly, guys, it is so much work and I can't keep up to this. Okay, so here we got a new session I just started, and let's tell it a little more about the actual project that I want to do. For example, I'm working on a GitHub project. Can you find out what it is about? And now it starts executing the web fetch tool and pulling down the information from the README file and just gathering more context about what this is. I want to read it a few more files. For example, it should learn more about the project structure, because I want this agent to really understand the project as a whole so that it can better work with this. And every time this agent starts or resetting the session, it should automatically gather this context from its memory so that it can better assist with our PR requests here. All right, so after some back and forth, it understood the final structure, the CLI program, the library, also the directories where I'm storing the actual libraries. And when I know, explain the task, like here I'm auto-updating container images and dependencies in my templates through it, which opens new PRs, and there's a version update. I quickly want to identify which version changes will introduce major updates and breaking templates and config settings, and which ones can be safely merged, because these are just minor updates or the breaking changes don't have an effect on my actual templates. Don't merge them yourself. I think this is super important, because otherwise OpenClaw might just decide on its own, hey, I'm just gonna merge everything that is safe, So yeah, that's what I meant in the beginning. You have to actually be careful with your prompts and what tasks that you describe. But when we say, hey, don't merge any of these yourself, it should write this to the memory and remember it. I mean, hopefully. Tell me every day at 8 a.m., for example, what new PRs you have found that we could safely merge. Just tell it in this chat here, because currently I haven't connected any channel. Okay, so what now happened, and this is super, super powerful. When we now go to cron job, you can see that it automatically added a cron job by itself that automatically runs at the desired schedule here. Super, super cool. What I think we can already learn from this is that, yes, indeed, OpenClaw is generally impressive. The flexibility is unmatched. You pick the model, you pick any of the channels you want, Discord, WhatsApp, you pick the skills. All of the 21,000 community skills described on Claw Hub are available to you. And yeah, the level of control you have from this is incredible. You can run it on your own self-controlled environment. In a VPS on Hostinger, you could run it on a small home lab instance or even on your local device. It's completely up to you. But regardless of all the excitement that I have, I think we have to stay skeptical about this, as it is still a beta project. The security implications are huge. And certainly if you're using pay-as-you-go token pricing, you will be surprised by how much it burns out your tokens, especially if you're doing all these tool chain callings. You can see it's producing so many different tasks and constantly iterating on all the stuff that goes wrong and trying other ways around it. I even had some scenarios where it completely broke my configuration file because it didn't have the right permissions to actually write to this config file. So it just assumed, hey, I just need to execute change root or change permissions on the file, and something was going wrong. It's even worse when you're running this on your local Mac and it just imagine it got immediately access to all of your files, your emails, your calendars. And certainly if the AI goes crazy, and it's even happening when you're sleeping or when you're not at your desk and you cannot react to this, then it's even getting worse. So yeah, I'm curious, I'm excited. In the future, I'll make more videos about the specific use cases and the projects and automations, maybe in my home lab, who knows, what I'm trying out next. And I hope this video helped you to get a better understanding of OpenClaw, how to set it up easily in a small VPS, or even use the CLI programs to configure it. And yeah, just give it a try. Break it, fix it, make it yours. Yeah, that's what I would recommend you to do next. Maybe it's better to do this in a safe and isolated environment than on your local desk. But yeah, that's what I told you multiple times in this video. And yeah, then just let me know how it's going and what's exciting stuff that you're working on. Please let me know on our Discord server. Just join our community and let's discuss some of the possibilities and also the security implications this program has. So yeah, a big thanks goes out to all of my subscribers, to all of the supporters on the YouTube and Patreon membership program. You guys are really amazing. Thank you so much for all the support. And of course, I'm going to catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.